No one knew exactly when things began to crack between Sara Bluma and Yaman. From the outside, everything still looked intact, photos that felt warm, moments that seemed natural, smiles that convinced fans nothing was wrong. But behind closed doors, one single word changed everything. Marriage. According to people close to Sara, it wasn't a dramatic argument. There was no shouting. No explosive fight. No tears in that exact moment. In fact, the conversation reportedly started calmly. Almost innocently. They were talking about the future. Not tabloids. Not social media. Not careers. The future. Sara had never hidden the fact that she wanted stability. Not necessarily a wedding right away, but clarity. Direction. Something solid to hold on to in a relationship that had already been under constant public pressure. So she asked the question many women eventually ask when they believe a relationship is serious: where is this going? At first, Ken didn't answer. Witnesses say his reaction wasn't anger, it was distance. A subtle shift. His body language changed. His eyes avoided hers. The room felt heavier, quieter, as if the air itself had tightened. Then the word marriage was mentioned. Not as a demand. Not as an ultimatum. But as a possibility. And that was the moment everything changed. According to Sara's inner circle, Ken became cold almost instantly. The warmth that once defined their dynamic disappeared. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He didn't even reject the idea openly. He simply shut down. From that day on, Sara noticed small but painful changes. Messages that once arrived instantly began taking hours. Calls became shorter. Plans were postponed. Excuses appeared where certainty used to be. And then came the silence. What hurt Sara most wasn't a breakup conversation, because there wasn't one. There was no clear ending, no closure, no mutual agreement to step back. Instead, there was disappearance. One morning, she noticed something strange. Ken had unfollowed her. Not just on one platform. On all of them. Instagram. Twitter. Anywhere their connection had been visible. As if she had been erased. Friends say Sara stared at her phone for a long time, refreshing the page, hoping it was a mistake. A glitch. A temporary decision made in frustration. But it wasn't. The unfollow stayed. The silence stayed. And Ken never called. What shocked Sara the most was how fast it happened. Just days earlier, they had been together, laughing, sharing private moments that felt real. And now, nothing. No explanation. No goodbye. No we should talk. Just distance. Insiders claim this is when Sara finally understood something painful. For Ken, the idea of commitment wasn't frightening because of marriage itself, but because of what it symbolized. Roots. Stability. A pause in constant movement. And Yaman, at that moment in his life, wasn't ready to stop moving. While Sara processed the emotional impact in silence, Ken reportedly threw himself into work, travel, and appearances, anything that kept him distracted and far away from difficult conversations. To the public, nothing was said. To fans, everything seemed normal. But for Sara, this was the beginning of a realization that would later explode into one of the most shocking confessions she had ever made. Because being left is painful. But being erased? That changes you. And this was only the beginning. After Ken disappeared from Sara's life, the silence became unbearable. At first, Sara told herself it was temporary. That he needed space. That intense careers, constant travel, and public pressure sometimes required distance. She tried to be understanding. She tried to be calm. But silence has a way of revealing truths that words never do. Days passed. Then weeks. And still, nothing. No message asking how she was doing. No late-night call. No explanation. just absence. What made the situation even more painful was how public everything became. Fans began to notice before Sara was emotionally ready to accept it herself. Screenshots circulated. Why did Ken unfollow Sara? Did they fight? Is this the end? Sara watched the internet dissect her private heartbreak in real time. People close to her say she avoided social media for days. When she finally opened Instagram again, the comments were brutal. Some blamed her. Some accused her of pushing too hard. Others claimed she wanted fame, attention, or security. None of them knew the truth. The truth was far simpler, and far sadder. Sara hadn't asked for a ring. She hadn't demanded a wedding date. She hadn't tried to trap anyone. She had asked for reassurance. And instead, she was met with disappearance. Insiders reveal that Sara tried reaching out one last time. Not to argue. Not to confront. Just to understand. The message was short. Honest. And unanswered. That was the moment everything inside her cracked. Friends say Sara cried not because she lost Ken, but because she realized she never truly had him in the way she believed. Loving someone who runs at the first sign of seriousness leaves scars deeper than any breakup ever could. Meanwhile, Ken's public life moved on effortlessly. New appearances. New interviews. New smiles. To the outside world, he looked free. Unbothered. Almost relieved. And that hurt Sara more than she ever expected. Because while she was questioning her worth, replaying every conversation, every word, every moment where she might have said something wrong, Ken was acting like nothing had happened at all. This contrast broke her. She stopped explaining herself to people. She stopped defending the relationship. She stopped pretending she was fine. Behind closed doors, Sara reportedly began to ask herself difficult questions. Was I too honest? Was I wrong to want stability? Did I scare him? Or did I simply reveal something he didn't want to face? The more she reflected, the clearer the answer became. Ken didn't leave because of marriage. He left because commitment would have forced him to choose, and he wasn't ready to choose her. That realization was devastating, but it was also freeing. Because once Sara accepted that truth, she stopped blaming herself. She began to understand that being erased wasn't a reflection of her value, but of his fear. Still, one question remained unanswered. Why disappear completely? Why unfollow, erase, and pretend nothing ever existed? According to those close to Sara, the answer is simple yet painful. Disappearing was easier than confronting the consequences of honesty. And silence? Silence protected Ken from accountability. But it also planted the seed for something he never expected. Because Sara Bluma would not stay silent forever. And when she finally spoke, the story would change completely. By the time Sara Bluma realized she could no longer hide from what had happened, the internet had already decided to tell the story for her. And like every story the internet touches, it was distorted. Blogs picked it up first. Then gossip pages. Then reaction videos. Headlines appeared overnight, each more aggressive than the last. Yaman cuts ties with Sara Bluma. Sara pushed too far? Did marriage scare him away? None of them asked Sara what really happened. They assumed. And assumption is cruel. Suddenly, Sara found herself portrayed as the woman who wanted too much. Too serious. Too fast. Too emotional. The narrative painted her as someone trying to force commitment onto a man who wasn't ready. What the headlines didn't mention was how quietly the conversation had happened. How respectfully she had spoken. How carefully she had chosen her words. They also didn't mention how easily Ken had walked away. Friends say Sara felt exposed. Stripped of context, dignity, and truth. Every move she made was analyzed. Every photo she posted was dissected for hidden messages. Every smile was questioned. If she's smiling, she must be lying. If she's silent, she must be guilty. There was no winning. For weeks, Sara said nothing. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she was still processing the pain herself. Speaking too soon would have meant speaking from anger, and Sara didn't want revenge. She wanted truth. Behind the scenes, she went through a quiet transformation. She leaned on close friends. She spent nights replaying memories, not to blame herself, but to finally understand what had been real and what had been imagined. And slowly, clarity arrived. The relationship wasn't a lie. The feelings weren't fake. But the future she imagined? That future had existed only in her heart. What hurt the most wasn't that Ken didn't want marriage. It was that he didn't want to talk about it. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Sara saw something that made her put her phone down immediately. Ken had posted a smiling photo. No caption. No explanation. Just a calm, effortless image. The comments exploded with relief. He's fine. Good for him. He dodged a bullet. That was the moment Sara understood something essential. Silence had protected him, but it had destroyed her. And that was unfair. Still, she didn't rush to speak out. She waited. She healed. She rebuilt her sense of self away from the noise. Those close to her say this was when Sara decided that if she ever spoke publicly, it wouldn't be to accuse, it would be to explain. To reclaim her voice. Weeks later, she was offered an interview. A quiet one. No shouting hosts. No sensational promises. Just a conversation. At first, she refused. Then she reconsidered. Not for drama. Not for attention. But because she was tired of being erased. Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of carrying the weight of a story she didn't write. She knew the moment she spoke, everything would change. Fans would choose sides. Headlines would explode. And Kim would be forced to confront a narrative he had avoided. But for the first time since the word marriage entered the conversation, Sara wasn't afraid. Because she had already lost the one thing she feared losing most. And when you've already been erased, you stop being afraid of the truth. When Sara Bluma finally decided to speak, she knew there would be no turning back. For weeks, she had rehearsed the words in her head, not to make them sharper, but to make them honest. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about attacking Yaman. And it certainly wasn't about winning public sympathy. It was about correcting a story that had been told without her consent. The interview took place in a quiet setting. No dramatic lighting. No aggressive questions. Just a calm space where Sara felt safe enough to finally say what she had been carrying inside for months. At first, she spoke carefully. She talked about pressure. About love under constant public scrutiny. About how difficult it is to build something real when millions of eyes are watching every move. But then the conversation shifted. The interviewer asked the question everyone had been waiting for. What actually happened between you and Ken? Sara paused. People who were present say the room went completely silent. She took a breath, not because she was nervous, but because she was choosing truth over comfort. And then she said the words that would change everything. When wedding talk started, everything stopped. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She didn't dramatize. She simply explained. Sara revealed that the moment marriage entered the conversation, even gently, even hypothetically, Kim pulled away emotionally. Not gradually. Not slowly. Instantly. He didn't say no, she explained. He didn't say yes either. He just disappeared. That sentence alone sent shockwaves through the internet. Because for the first time, the narrative flipped. This wasn't a story about a woman pushing too hard. It was a story about a man who chose silence over honesty. Sara went on to describe how confusing that silence was. How painful it felt to wake up one day and realize she had been erased from someone's life without explanation. I wasn't asking for a wedding, she said calmly. I was asking if we were walking in the same direction. That distinction mattered. Fans who watched the interview noticed something else too. There was no bitterness in her tone. No anger. Just sadness mixed with clarity. She admitted that Ken had always struggled with the idea of permanence. That his life had been built around movement, freedom, and avoiding anything that felt like an anchor. I don't think he's a bad person, she added. I think he was just afraid of what commitment would demand from him. That sentence divided the internet in half. Some praised her maturity. Some accused her of exposing too much. Others finally understood why the breakup had felt so cold and sudden. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Sara confirmed what fans had suspected but never heard directly. Yes, she said. He unfollowed me. Everywhere. Without a word. No warning. No conversation. No closure. Just deletion. I felt like I never existed, she admitted quietly. That was the moment the interviewer stopped asking questions. Because nothing else needed to be asked. Within hours, clips from the interview flooded social media. Headlines exploded. Fan pages went into meltdown. People replayed the same sentence again and again. When wedding talk started, he fled. And for the first time, Yaman's silence felt loud. Very loud. Because Sara had done something powerful. Not by attacking him, but by telling her truth without filters. She didn't accuse him of betrayal. She didn't claim he lied. She simply exposed the cost of avoidance. And once that truth was out, it couldn't be erased the way she had been. After Sara Bluma's confession went public, the noise was immediate. Clips spread across every platform within hours. Her words were replayed, dissected, debated. Fans who had once speculated suddenly felt like they were witnessing the missing piece of a puzzle fall into place. But one thing stood out above everything else. Yaman said nothing. No statement. No denial. No clarification. Just silence. And this time, the silence wasn't interpreted as mystery or elegance. It was interpreted as confirmation. People close to Ken say he was fully aware of the impact Sara's words were having. He saw the headlines. He saw the fan reactions. He saw how quickly public opinion shifted, not against him, but toward understanding her. She wasn't attacking him, one insider noted. That's what made it impossible to respond. Because how do you argue with honesty delivered calmly? Sources reveal that Ken briefly considered releasing a statement. A neutral one. Carefully worded. Something that would soften the narrative without directly contradicting Sara. But in the end, he chose not to. And that choice said everything. Instead, his inner circle began doing the talking for him. Anonymous quotes appeared in the press. Phrases like bad timing, different life goals, and no villains in this story were quietly leaked. Yet none of them addressed the core issue. The disappearance. The erasure. The silence. Fans noticed. What once might have been dismissed as privacy now felt like avoidance. And avoidance, after Sara's confession, no longer looked neutral. It looked like fear. In the days that followed, Ken reduced his online presence. Posts became rare. Appearances felt more controlled. Even his usual confidence seemed muted. Those who know him say the confession hit a nerve, not because it exposed something untrue, but because it forced him to confront something he had always avoided. Commitment. Not marriage itself. But accountability. Sara, meanwhile, did something unexpected. She went quiet. No victory lap. No follow-up interviews. No cryptic posts. She didn't need to add anything else. Her truth had already landed. Friends describe her as lighter. Not happier, but calmer. The kind of calm that comes after finally being heard. After months of being misrepresented, she no longer felt the need to explain herself. She had closed the chapter without slamming the door. And that is what gave her power. The public slowly began to understand something deeper about this story. This wasn't about villains or victims. It was about timing, emotional readiness, and the consequences of choosing silence over honesty. Ken wasn't cruel. Sara wasn't demanding. They were simply standing at different emotional destinations, and only one of them was willing to say it out loud. In the end, the most telling moment of all wasn't the unfollow, the breakup, or even the confession. It was what came after. Sara spoke. Ken stayed silent. And in that contrast, the truth became impossible to ignore. Because sometimes, the loudest answer isn't a statement, it's the silence that follows it.